Besides the variability, I've sort of mentioned severe and mild charge a bit, and families often ask me, do you think my child has severe charge or mild charge? And what I've come to believe is severe or mild is different depending on when you're talking about it. So in infancy, I think it's kind of obvious that severity is referring to life-threatening medical issues. You're not really worried about the hearing loss, the vision loss, and that kind of thing if you've got a life-threatening heart defect and breathing problems and immune system problems and that kind of thing. So in infancy, severity is really talking about the birth defects and the medical issues that have to be dealt with to be able to survive. If you survive infancy and you're getting into childhood, certainly ongoing medical problems are still important, but this is where the sensory and behavior things really come into play. So what kind of vision loss you have, what kind of hearing loss you have, how your balance is, what your behavior issues are, those are all things that make communication difficult and make learning difficult. And so someone that has a school-age child with charge is more likely to describe them as severe when they have more sensory issues. By the time you get to adulthood, it's more native intelligence. Presumably hopefully they've had appropriate education and their medical issues are fairly stable. And the question is, can they live independently? How much support do they need? What kind of jobs can they do? That kind of thing. So severe or mild in adulthood is more referring to the intellectual capabilities. So how well do kids with charge do? Well, if you look at the typical 2-year-old with charge, she's probably spent 5 or 6 months in the hospital over that 2 years. She's had at least 6 or 7 different surgeries. She's followed by 10 different medical specialists, and she hasn't even hit the educational system yet. She's probably fed by a gastrostomy tube. She might have a tracheostomy. She's not walking, not talking, nowhere near toilet training, and has some pretty unusual behaviors. If you just took a look at that child, you'd say, oh my goodness, she's so delayed and she's pretty odd. And you would think, oh, she's not going to ever do anything. Well, that's not the case. How much can they catch up? In some cases, a lot. So early delays does not predict ultimate outcome. The spectrum of intelligence in charge is from above normal to extremely impaired. I've had professional adults email me and say, I had these problems when I was a kid and I got online and I started looking at them and I think I have charge. And they tell me about themselves and they send me a picture and sure enough, they have charge and it just never got diagnosed. So the spectrum is the entire spectrum. I always tell parents to assume normal intelligence until proven otherwise. That long-term outcome, long-term prognosis might be very good. Individuals with charge are input impaired. The information coming in is not complete because of the hearing loss and the vision loss and that sort of thing. So it's taking longer to get information in. Some are output impaired. It's difficult for them to have facial expression or to speak or to communicate. So assessing them is a very, very difficult task, and you'll hear more about that in this course. We absolutely totally expect delayed motor milestones in people with charge, but that is not a prediction of how they will do otherwise. At one of our very first conferences, we had an adult with charge get up and talk about his life. He actually signed, his father spoke for him, and he says, my name is Daniel, and I'm 24 years old, and I have a dog, and I have a cat, and I live in an apartment, and this is what I do for a living, and this is where I go for vacation, and all that sort of thing. And he talked about it, and he sat down, and his father got up and said, when Daniel was 10, he was lying on the floor looking at Legos. So that's one of the possibilities, is at 10, lying on the floor looking at Legos, and at 24, independent adult. That's certainly not every person with charge, but that's one of the possibilities. So I always try and give families lots and lots of hope. Again, early delay does not predict ultimate outcome. Some people with charge will become completely independent. Most people with charge will require at least some support throughout life, mostly because of the sensory deficits, and some will require complete support for their entire lives. It's the whole spectrum, and we're not going to know early on what it is.